Okay, thanks, Mike, and welcome everyone. We have a great topic today. SOC-in-a-Box. Just a side note: our college is working with Norwich on this activity, putting in a SOC at our college. So this is a really great opportunity and a lot of good information. So John Canellis is the Vice President and COO for Norwich University Applied Research Institute. And Caleb, I can't pronounce your last name well, so I'm not going to try to butcher it, is the Senior Systems Administrator for Norwich University Applied Research Institution. And I'm going to just turn it over to you guys, and thank you for participating.
Well, thanks for having us as well. I think we had one poll question. Are we able to get that out, Mike or Stephen? Just to get us started, and then thank you. And then Caleb, if you want to share the screen, we'll just run through the details that we did have. I appreciate everybody's time, and I do appreciate the invite. Brian, is it Brian Volkmuth? Did I say that right?
Yes.
So I'm coming to you from Little Falls, Minnesota. Wow. Caleb's joining us from Vermont. So I saw you were at St. Cloud Tech, and I thought, hey, right down the road. Quick shout out. All right, Caleb, we can run through the agenda. Thanks for the introduction. Again, I'm the Vice President and Chief Operating Officer for the Research Institute. So Norwich University is the first oldest senior military college in the United States, founded in 1819. And so they're 200 years old. Newari, the Norwich University Applied Research Institute, is 20 years old. So we were founded by our current sitting president, Phil Sussman, who's been a cyber evangelist his entire career. So a lot of the work that's come out of this and where our focus is as a research institute is on cyber. But we are a separate 501c3 organization affiliated with the university, but not, we don't share financials. We don't share those resources that can get you in trouble from a legal perspective. And we do some DoD, DHS contracting that elevates the level of risk an organization can have, which is the initial reason for the split. So just running through concepts, where this was formed, and then we'll turn it over to Caleb to walk through the different operations, tech stacks, how a lot of the research takes place, and then just how we manage the business on our end. Obviously, that's important as you're going through all of this. We'll close up with that and then walk and talk through questions if that works. And then are you able to share the results of that first question? Caleb, you can go to the next one. Perfect. Thank you. So experiential education is the name of the game at Norwich. So when we, just like everybody else, right, we started the conversation off we're talking about working and trying to engage with employers and develop the workforce, it was impossible to send a new fresh grad out of any of our institutions when the requirement was 3 to 5 years, 3 to 5 years, 3 to 5 years. So in seeking some of the employers that we were looking to work with, partner with, get students experience, there was always the ask around, well, can we have interns or have folks come work with you, learn from you? In more of the small and medium businesses around, or I don't want to say more immature organizations, but ones that haven't been established as well, probably needed as much help as some of the larger organizations where we were able to send interns. So we had started to make asks around, well, what if we could actually facilitate this SOC for people or for these organizations, and then we would be responsible for and run the interns and potentially have a way to make it so that it was self-sustaining. So we would get research, we'd get the information, we'd get to, you'll see services refinement on there as one of the bullet points, kind of develop different sets of capabilities while these clients' needs are being met where they haven't been met before. Plus we're getting the interns the experience, or even the professionals the experience in the door and with those organizations directly, that ends up creating a win all the way around for everybody. And so the first client request or requirement we had was a little bit of a larger client, not from the beginning. So that the project scope started out, we were doing, I think it was like 200 to 300 gigabytes a day, and by the end of it, or near the end of it, there were some days where we were hitting 7 terabytes that we were in the process of monitoring. So you can imagine what scope creep looks like. So when you look at how we integrated, how we started, and some of the different ads that we had to include, or we had to be a little more conscious of, or we had to literally hit the reset button and come back to make sure we're serving the client correctly, had us, I think it was the first or second iteration, is around the second iteration, where the amount of data that increased that we were looking at and monitoring at that point was changed significantly. So we started to look at it and say, well, if we want to take on more than just the one client that we were working with at that time, it'd be a lot easier if we just, here's our set of standard operating procedures, and they don't change. And when they do, we just add capabilities. Here is the current tech stack that we would use. And sometimes clients have different requirements, and they want you to use their sets of, like Splunk and CrowdStrike, right? Everybody's probably familiar with. They'll want you to use theirs. Well, we don't have those included in our cost because the clients picked them up and they're paying for it. But if we were just to take this out ourselves and use the tools that we create and that we need to be successful, that's kind of how we approach it. Okay, this is how the tech stack exists. So standard operating procedures, the technical stack. Here's the different operations and missions that Caleb will get into initially. And then the services refinement, I think I laugh at myself every time I say this, but when we started the actual services and we started threat hunting, we started developing tools, we started actually gaining or ingesting data, we just kept saying yes to everything and figured it out, or sometimes didn't figure it out right away. But when we developed this, again, you get back to that second iteration, you say, hey, I gotta put all of this together so that when the next client comes on, I can say, yep, here's what we do. This sits here, this sits here, this takes this long, the behavioral analysis takes this long, the overall implementation takes this long. And it's very different for two different types of organizations. One, you get your how many employees, full-time employees, what type of level, whether they're an enterprise, an up, a mid, a small, medium business. The actual integration or onboarding process can take longer depending on size. And then overall level of maturity and availability. So sometimes you'll get into a one CISO shop or a one security person shop, and it changes their ability to work with you because they're swamped. But that was the whole reason they brought you on or said yes. So putting everything into those nice little buckets created this, what we call in our referencing here, the SOC-in-a-Box, but it came from a client that we were serving, and we said, oh, we got to change. Oh, we got to change. Oh, we got to change. And then we just kind of packaged it up nice and neatly and have multiple uses for it now. So we can serve people in a variety of ways. We can do the full-on integration. We can just advise if we want to, if that's all somebody wants, or just take certain parts of it or pieces of it, show them how we do it and why we do it a certain way. And that's kind of what allows us to take, again, this concept and get it out to the rest of the world. The other thing that we can do with this is take the whole thing, hand it off, run it, and then slowly hand it off to the organization that ultimately wants to have their own. So that's me closing it up on the concept for now, and I'll turn it over to Caleb. Thank you.
Good. Thank you, John. So like John said, we kind of wanted to have the opportunity to be able to go over the advice and assistance that we give these organizations and share the lessons learned that we've had, along the journey so far. And this kind of starts off with standard operating procedures. This is what we want folks to focus on when they're first spinning up their SOCs. A lot of people need to take into account, how is your team going to operate? This needs to take into account, how team members communicate with one another. What are the expectations of analysts? and what is each role on your team responsible for. So our standard operating procedures, like John has said, really have evolved a ton since we first began. The gentleman that originally spun up our SOC, he was actually a part of the Air Force. So what he did was to kind of streamline our process of spinning things up, was kind of take what he knew in the Air Force and implement it over here at Newari. We did eventually move away from that, but that was kind of for two reasons. Number one was initially we thought we'd have a much larger presence for our internship candidates who were going to be branching into an area of the armed services. And that was great for a while, but we kind of found that, our internship candidates still had a significant civilian presence, as well as our full-timers were, primarily made up of civilians. So that was kind of one area that we started to evolve in. But kind of moving on to talent, like I said, you're going to need to figure out how your team communicates. You're going to need to figure out what your team's going to be doing. So what is your team going to be comprised of? Because this will dictate the different tasks of your team members. So for example, you're going to have your security analysts that are responding to, your alerts, escalating them up to your customers and sending off reports. You're going to have your system administrators that are, managing your systems, patching systems, etc. You're going to have your team leads that are, managing and orchestrating your operations throughout the day. And then, like I said, you might have your interns. I know we work with a lot of educational institutions, and this is a significant area where we try and help with our lessons learned, right? Integrating that kind of educational aspect can be a real challenge. And we've evolved a lot since I first went through the internship program. I was an intern back in 2019, and I actually got hired on as a security analyst. And now, lo and behold, I'm here as a senior system security administrator. So, but something else you might want to think about is, are you ever going to need any more specialized roles? So specialized roles, specialized training. Like I said, I know that we're lucky enough to work closely with Norwich University. We actually take advantage of their cyber leadership development program, and it allows Norwich University to send us a specially curated pool of interns to come work through our SOC. So that might be something you want to work with your educational institutions to take advantage of if you can put together a program like that is designed to give students potentially in a cybersecurity degree program, a specific opportunity in terms of an internship. I know that last year we had about 16 interns go through our program, and it's actually been kind of been steadily increasing over the last couple of years. So kind of tying this all together, you've got your operating procedures, you've got your talent that's going to be working through these operations. But what services do you want to offer? Like John said, our services can kind of, in terms of trying to tailor our services to the needs of our customers, it can get a little complicated. So you're really going to want to think about your team's adaptability. Are you okay with one-off service requests? For example, so, our first initial customer, actually, they wound up needing help with their software approval process. So we actually spun up a sandbox environment so we could do sandbox analysis on the potential software that they wanted to run in their environment. So the sandbox allowed us to, generate a report on, is this a malicious piece of software? What is it reaching out to? Does it even just introduce a security vulnerability into your system that you might not want to run in it? We also had another client that actually wanted us to provide some light pen testing for a software product they had. That was actually a lot of fun, but that was a one-off. We didn't wind up doing that again with them. So again, though, you're going to want to think about how you perform these services. So for example, do you just want to perform traditional security monitoring, or are you going to be required to perform computer forensics inside your organization? So, because that's something that we kind of run into. Folks don't necessarily understand, what goes into, that escalation process to send alerts off to a customer, right? For example, you might be performing an incident response for your organization, but you haven't really taken into account what specifically you need to do when looking at a hard drive, right? Do you need chain of custody forms as that hard drive changes hands amongst people in the organization? Because you never know where these things might go. Perhaps it goes into a legal matter, and you need to be able to recreate the exact steps that you took in order to reach, your conclusion, right? So once you've kind of figured all of that out, this gets into this idea of missions. Like I said, with our standard operating procedures, they've evolved a lot. Originally, we kind of had that Air Force model, but this is something that we really stuck with. It's something that we found really works for our day-to-day operations, this idea of missions. So really in its simplest form is it's a simple PowerPoint presentation, 1 or 2 slides, and it's got one column that's your goals for the day, and the other column is the folks that are going to be fulfilling those goals. And it's a good way of tracking metrics for your team, determining what tasks, might need more folks to participate in them. And the way we typically structure our day is a kickoff meeting in the morning and then a debrief in the afternoon. In the morning, we assign goals for team members, and in the afternoon, we'll figure out what was completed and then what needs to be kicked over to the next day. Obviously, how folks, want to run their day-to-day operations is up to them. This is just what we found works really well for us. And one example of a mission that I ran in the past, this was actually a lot of fun. I was working with 3 interns at the time, and I actually tasked them with creating their own mission for the day. So what they did was they researched kind of a current event, and it wound up being that malicious actors were using the platform Discord to host and distribute malware. So what we did was we divvied up the tasks. One intern was doing just kind of the normal, live traffic monitoring, keeping up with what was coming in as it was coming in. And then 2 others split off to research how you might search for this malicious activity. First, we determined if Discord was actually on our customer's network, which it was, so it meant we could look for this. And through research, we found that these files were being stored as .mp3 files. So we used a little bit of critical thinking. Where is a .mp3 file going to be default stored? Going to be the downloads folder. So we looked for .mp3 files running directly from the downloads folder. We wrote a query for it, we ran that, and we actually, lo and behold, found .mp3 files running from the downloads folder that were actually classified as potential ransomware. I was actually really surprised by this. So we followed our standard operating procedures. We wrote up a report, we escalated that to our customer, and we waited for feedback. The good part is it wound up being a false positive. So kind of things were all clear there. But I kind of found that example that I did with those interns kind of is a prime example of, how our missions are shaped by our SOP, and as we follow our procedures, how we can kind of generate that feedback loop with our customers. So that's kind of how we perform our operations. And obviously, you guys have any questions on that, we'll get to a questions section where I can kind of get a little bit more into specifics if you guys have questions on that. But now this is kind of the part that I find the most fun is your tech stacks. I love working with tools. I love setting up tools. They're really fun to work with. So you don't want to think about what tools is your organization going to need, what tools are going to best fit your organization, right? Do you want to go open source or closed sourced? Where are these tools going to be hosted, on-prem or in the cloud? Or maybe you even want to invest in software as a service. But kind of from our research and over the years, we found that the tools kind of comes down to kind of a 4-tool minimum. You're going to start with your SIEM, which is your apparatus that you'll use to ingest data from your clients and organizational users. You'll have your case management system, which is the tool that you use to track security alerts and incidences, and it'll allow you to escalate and store reports as well as track indicators of compromise. You'll have your ticketing system, and this is what allows you to track user requests as well as interface with customers or stakeholders. And you'll have your communication tool, which is just, that allows your team to communicate reliably with one another, kind of getting away from just email or like a traditional group chat or something like that. So the next thing you want to do is identify which tools will work best for you. So what Nuwari's tech stack is comprised of, and obviously this isn't an endorsement of any products, it's just what we found works best for us. For our SIEM, we use the Elastic Stack. For our case management system, we use the Hive. For our ticketing system, we use Jira. And for our communication tool, we use Microsoft Teams. Kind of like our standard operating procedures, though, we've evolved our tech stack over time. So originally our SIEM was AWS OpenSearch, and our case management system was a tool called Scott. But over time, we found that their capabilities didn't meet the requirements that we were looking for. So eventually we did more research and we found, overall better fit. For our ticketing system, our IT team had already actually been using Jira to track user requests, and we actually already operated in Norwich University's Office 365 environment, so we took advantage of Microsoft Teams. So this kind of gets me to another point that I wanted to make, which is take advantage of the systems that are already in place in your organization. Sometimes, and I know we've actually talked with different schools that we're trying to help, they'll already have a security team that's part of the college as they're trying to spin up their SOC. So what they'll do is they'll actually operate within their security team's, SIEM environment while they're spinning up their own implementations. So just something that can sometimes be overlooked is, like I said, definitely take advantage of what's already there. Another tool that you might want to consider are threat intelligence tools. So I know in the past we've used MISP. We're actually in the process right now of kind of revitalizing our threat intelligence program here. But it kind of gets into the idea of open source intelligence versus closed source intelligence. So what people would be really surprised is there's a lot of open source intelligence out there. Some examples might be Alien Vault OTX. You might have Abuse IPDB. VirusTotal is a great one. It definitely something to take advantage of and to kind of bolster like your alerting capabilities. When you're thinking about, you know, open source versus closed source, it starts to become just a price game. You know, a lot of times with closed source intelligence tools, you do start to get a much more custom feed, but it's very expensive, and you can take our word for that. So you really just need to kind of weigh that pros and cons list of, is that cost worth the benefit? So that's kind of a high level overview of how we, you know, we run our operations, the tools that we use, and how we fulfill our clients' requests. And kind of, I'm going to turn it back over here to John in just a second to talk a little bit more about the finance side of things. But something I want you guys to really take away from here is that, you know, starting your SOC, at the end of the day, there's a lot of free tools out there. There's a lot of free resources out there to take advantage of. And it really is easy to start to implement your own security operations in your own institutions. So John, ready to go?
You bet. Thank you. So this is an example of our cost sheet that we use when we're looking at taking on a client. So there's a formula that we have specifically for our team on how we can do threat hunting. If somebody wants threat hunting, if they don't want threat hunting, they just want the monitoring, alerting, or certain things to be responded to, or specific types of research. You just figure out the hours and you figure out the project scope, and always know that no matter what they tell you for how many hours you think it'll take, just add 25%, because that's what's going to happen. But so typically here we'll have a labor category on the left-hand side under direct labor, have the person's name, have their labor rate. And then, I mean, if you're going to add somebody for an entire year and they're going to be working that one project, then you would put 2,080 hours in, or at least for us, it's 2,080 hours in the category there. So as a government contractor, we have an overhead and G&A rate. Our fringe is figured into our overhead rate. So the overhead and G&A is a requirement for us to do. Most higher ed institutions will probably just have that fringe rate that you would want to consider. And then the fee, as it's listed on here, is profit, is what it is. So those can vary based on what your school's requirements are up in the top right hand corner. But so that overhead and G&A column only, the G&A too, by the way, is compounded for us, so as well as the fee. So whatever the base labor costs are, then you add overhead, then you add your G&A on top of your overhead and base together, then your fee goes on top of all of that. So that's how we figure in who's going to be working on this, what are they going to be doing, how long do we think it's going to take them. And when you're ramping up labor hours, a lot of times that threat hunting is what ramps it up a little bit further than just alerting and monitoring and writing reports. And then we go to external labor here, the line right in the middle. So if we say yes to something, and you know, sometimes you bite off a little more than you can chew. You have to go hire somebody, take an external person in or a partner. You bring them in, you say, yep, this is where they're going to go, but this is what they're going to do on this contract or on this project. That's where that external labor goes. You don't add overhead onto external labor. It's just the general and administrative costs. And then with the other direct costs there, material, travel, sometimes the client will say, hey, we want you to come on site, and then you figure in your typical travel costs. Or under materials there, that's where we'll add the tech stacks that aren't open source. That one I left in there. I think that was recorded future. I don't know that to be entirely true, but I think that was a requirement for somebody a couple years ago. But so putting the sheet together and being as conservative as you can with your estimates around the time people are going to spend on it, and breaking down the different materials for each of these clients. So now if you add a client to this, right, and you're not going to add people, you can go in here and break up your hours and shift some of the hours to what might be other people's or other organizations' requirements. If you're able to do that, sometimes it's a good indicator of when you need to hire too. If you're getting a lot of if you're responding to a lot of RFPs or getting requests to onboard some of these employers that want to work with you or are going to work with you, it's not a bad idea to have that talent pool lined up, which means juniors and seniors. It's a nice, quick, and typically an easier transition, especially if they've done work in here prior. So this is how we look at organize and for the most part control our costs as much as we humanly possibly can, because if you're going to stand this up, you want to be able to serve folks and you want to be self-sustaining. It's a lot easier to walk into a director or a board meeting and say, yeah, this is how we know we're going to organize this. This is what it's going to cost us. This is what it's going to look like with inflation if you did this a couple years out. And it helps you get you a good picture, at least an understanding, and then a way to really manage and control your monthly and even weekly tasks that folks get. That's it. I think the next one is a discussion Q&A.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Great. That's very informative. So if anyone has a question, they can either put it in the chat or just unmute and ask the question. I had a couple questions on the internships. Can they be working remotely as well as in the SOC, physical SOC, or how is that working?
Yes. And there is a tool where if you wanted to or had to look over their shoulder, Caleb, help me with the name of the tool. Is that
SkyTap?
SkyTap, yeah. So SkyTap's what we're using to actually see what an intern would be doing from a distance. And if there were things that we needed to cut up or remove for whatever, reason, then we could do that.
And if you were going to use that SOC as also a tool in your training in some of your courses, have you tried to do that, or is that feasible?
I don't know if we have actually done that outside of kind of that intern / seminar course that's where we typically will take them on.
Yeah, well, I think what we're thinking is we're going to use in the internship, in part of that internship, they'll be using the tool, and there'll be some, we have a EC Council CSA certification course that they would be taking at the same time they're interning, so that they could get that SOC certification. That's the thinking anyway. So
Yeah.
we'll see how it goes.
We would say yes to that.
Okay. There's a question here. Let's see.
I got my hand up, Stephen.
Okay, go ahead.
And there's another one right behind me.
Okay.
Hi, this is Ann Conkey. I'm from the University of Detroit Mercy, and with me is Manoj, and he is a graduate research assistant, and we are specifically focusing on getting a SOC up and running here at the University of Detroit Mercy, with the purpose of really having it in the curriculum for the bachelor level somewhere in the curriculum. And what we're trying to do is we're trying to provide internship possibility. Plus, I'm sure there's a bunch of small businesses in Detroit that can't afford monitoring services. And we would love to be able to get their data and learn and of course, help them. So I'm trying to do a win-win all the way around. And so thank you so much for this webinar, by the way. This is really, really helpful. I was just trying to take as many notes as I could on the tools. And so some of the pronunciations, I'm not sure if I quite caught the names of the tools, but I might be bugging you. So when you're just like starting out with the Elastic Stack, I'm to the point where I want to start buying some servers and maybe host it, have it in-house or on-prem. So that we can start building out the actual, like an Elastic Stack SIEM, and then start training or using that in the classroom somehow. Do you have any specs on server size or hard drive farms or, the technical?
Yep. So I think I have the specifics off the top of my head, and I can follow up with you after the fact. I want to say, because we have 2 servers running in Flint Hall on campus. I believe they were, oh geez. I know they were 12 terabyte storage. I think it was 64 gigs of RAM a piece, and then 32 cores a piece.
Perfect. Okay, got it. I understand. Yeah, I was gonna look, obviously some of the servers are on back order, and I need to get them delivered by a certain date in order for it to fall into this academic year. So I'm gonna get the beefiest I could get. So, all right, that's very, very helpful. I appreciate it. I'm probably gonna be bugging you later offline for specifics. Thank you.
Thank you. I see Jeremy Padre ask a question to everybody on the subject of internship. Does your organization facilitate any DoD skill bridge programs, which is the allowing transitioning military members to work for up to 180 days? We haven't done that program, and I don't know. We haven't applied for it or sought approval to be for that one specifically. We did run a program with career transitioners for spouses of some of the or military spouses, sorry. And that is, gosh, we did that 2 summers ago, and that was 17 folks with no cybersecurity education, where we had to get them they went through a program previous to ours, and then we did our onboarding process to get them to be able to sit crew, or what we call sitting crew, to work in the SOC as an analyst. And they were, so that was, yeah, 17 people, and all female.
There's a question from Tina, as do you have a set of training for your L1, L2, or L3 levels?
I might need a little bit more clarification on the question.
Probably you're talking about the SOC analyst 1, 2, or 3. You know, it's kind of like what we're doing with our CSA certification course, which is really certification for a SOC 1, SOC 2 analyst.
Yes, thank you.
Okay. You know, we have like our initial onboarding training for you know, any full-timer analyst, and we try and mirror that training with our interns to kind of give them as real world of an experience as we can. And then we do offer continuous training as folks are moving up as part of our team. It's not super strict right now, but we do have continuous training, yes.
Someone had their hand up, and I was going to get to you next, but you took your hand down. Let's see, I think Alper, is that who it was? I can't remember.
Yes, I actually posted my question. I was wondering about the legal side of things. If you can give some recommendations about contracts and memorandum of understandings, insurance, like how do we cover our ourselves? Because the students will be working part of the university. And I want to thank you for this great presentation as well.
We do. So as I referenced earlier, no, this is me saying what we do, not telling you how you should do this from a legal perspective. But for every client that we're working with, everybody gets the non-disclosure agreement. So any intern that's coming, any professional staff, anybody that's in our organization in general, even if they're not on the SOC, are signing the same NDA for it kind of covers everything. So it's just, we just don't talk about what we're doing, how we're doing it, and why we're doing it a specific way. We were okay in this presentation, but and then everybody has a strategic partner agreement that we cover down on everything that we're able to take risks for. So if a client says, hey, I want you to, we've never had anybody come back and say, we want you to take more risk. But you have to, and everybody's appetite for that, especially from a legal counsel perspective and in an organizational perspective, is different. This is, when you're talking about a SOC, these are not prevention services, as they are, especially from an alerting and monitoring perspective, that's all reactive, right? That something's already happened, you've just identified it. Now you try to minimize the damage, right? And that's where the more of the legal and risk appetite comes in. Who's going to be responsible for what? And you got to work that out ahead of time before that even gets set up, because both parties with the skill sets and with the capabilities should understand, yes, this is cyber. Yes, this could happen, but you're going to do everything you can here. So are we. Here's where we're going to meet in the middle. We've never had an issue come up that has put us in an awkward situation. So the NDA, the strategic partner agreement, and then then we have an actual work order, like, hey, this is where the signature goes for here's how much it's going to be. Here's exactly what the services are. Here's whether it's 12/7 or 8/5 or 24/7. Then the details actually go inside of a work order. And I can share actually those templates with the group here if you're interested in seeing them or using them.
Okay, any other questions? Someone asked if the recording is going to be shared. Mike can tell you, but it is shared out on the website, I think. So I had one other question I'm just thinking about did you say you were a nonprofit, or you are a for-profit?
We're a nonprofit.
Nonprofit, okay.
Yes, sir.
Okay, I'm just curious on how that was set up, and so is there any? I don't know that I know a little bit about nonprofits, but not a lot. But I guess that's something that we'd have to understand about. Any profit you make, then that has to go back into something, I would imagine, I mean, you can make a little bit of money, I guess, but I don't know how that works. I'm just curious.
You have to, from a nonprofit perspective, you have to be pretty much on target with your mission to be considered your nonprofit, because of those tax breaks that you do or that we do end up receiving. So, and then you have certain reporting requirements, and you have certain like you have to have a governing board as a nonprofit, which we do, and that's yeah. So there's a number of rules and requirements to be a nonprofit, but a lot of times it's like a university, right? Harvard's a nonprofit, and has anybody seen Harvard's endowment in the last couple of years? Like, their entire operations are covered by interest on their endowment. I mean, like, nonprofits can definitely make money.
Okay.
And sometimes profit is a dirty word when you're in the nonprofit space, but nobody's doing this for a loss.
Yeah. And you shared some open source products with us when we've been working with you on the SOC-in-the-Box, and if that's a contract that you entered in, I don't know if that's still available for institutions or not. Is that something that can still be offered? The SOC-in-the-Box agreement, like we have with your school and with our school.
Yeah. Yes,
okay,
sir.
so it is available. So that if someone wanted that consulting as services, they can contact you all and get that set something up to start working out the requirements. I know we had to get an MOU signed or something like that with the president of our college, with your organization.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, okay. Just so they'll know that. I don't know, you may want to, if you have, would they just contact you, John, or Caleb, or how would that?
Yeah, you can contact me. So there's and for a lot of this stuff, we'll hand over the same stuff that we've sent to you, sir, for the organization, and
right.
I think pretty much everybody in here falls under the same guidelines and requirements for the things that we're able to provide at this time at no charge. So
okay, I'm gonna, you don't mind if I share some of that software that you've open source stuff? I'll just put it in the chat. So I know Ann was looking at some stuff, and so there's just some of the stuff that was recommended to us. Some of it we're working in, and some of it we, like Caleb had mentioned, some of the tools we already have in place with the ITS department. So we're working with our actually, we're working with the university ITS department because we're under this university system. So there's 2 community colleges and 1 university. So we share IT responsibilities. So they're working with us on this project. And so they already had like the help desk software and things like that. So anyway, it's something that really, that you're right about that. It took a while to get all the ITS folks in the university on board with, it's a tail wagging this dog or what? So anyway, but I think it's going to be great. And so I just wanted to point that out to everybody so that if you have any other questions, if not, we'll wrap it up for today. Let's see. See, what is it? So we have one chat in there. Please share your thoughts about today's question. Oh, okay. That was Mike. So Mike has put the link in there for, is that the link for the survey? Yeah, it is. Okay. Okay. Mike, you have any final words?
I just want to say thank you, everybody, for coming today, and appreciate. So we are wrapping up. This is our last one for the 2023 year. We are putting our schedule together for 2024. We have had a really good, I think, a good series this year, and we'd be really interested in getting your feedback. So we're, like I said, we're putting that schedule together. This year we had 11 monthly meetings. We don't have one in December. But we've averaged between 50 and 75 people who've attended all of our sessions this year. So it's a great opportunity. If you have a topic and you want to share that, or if you have a topic that you want to bring forward, we can try to highlight that for next year. I also want to bring to your attention that on the NCyTE webpage, we have all of the membership meetings are available there. Let me see if I can go there real quick. And I'll share that.
We are working on a panel to discuss AI sometime in the March-April timeframe, just to give you an idea that some of the key topics that people are interested in. So we're going to try to get different perspectives on that.
So when we do have the recording up, we'll just put it out here, the recording, the presentation. This was last month's meeting. We already have some information up there for today's meeting about the presenters and a little bit about Norwich University. So if you want to see what we offered in the past, it's, our last year's presentations are all out there. If something looks interesting and you want to check that out as well. That's all I have.
Okay. Well,
Thank
thanks,
you,
John. Thanks, Caleb. And thanks everyone for attending, and have a happy Thanksgiving and a nice holidays over December. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.